Let's keep going. We implemented the capability of being able to log in, right, which is great. But notice that if I grab this URL, yes, and even if I log out, yes, and I go to if I go to Safari and I have that URL, I can just paste that URL, and I can still go there even though I have not logged in, which makes no sense, right? And the reason is that it's because the state of the application is entirely determined by the URL, which is okay, right? Most of it should be, but certainly not for things that need to be secured, right? Somehow we skipped over one particular status, right? Or verification of a particular status, right? So certainly we would like to make sure that if you're coming here, right, we should check to see whether you are logged in. So certainly we want to protect the profile page, right? We want to protect it and say, wait a minute, let me check to see if you are indeed logged in. If you are, then I'll let you in. Okay, so let's do that. So what we're going to do is we already know how to log you in, right? And identify and make sure that we remember that you are logged in. But now we have to use that mechanism to be able to protect certain navigations on the client side. Now on the client side, we have a navigation configured in the configjs over here, and we have that the profile navigation is right here. It's handled by this route over here. What we'd like to be able to do is add some logic to check to see if indeed we are logged in, right? And if we're not logged in, to not allow us to continue. Make sense? Right? So what we're going to do here is that we're going to add an additional configuration here that says, hey, before I let you, before I've identified your intention to navigate to this route. That is your intention. I see that you want to navigate there. But I need to make sure that certain things need to be met first, right? Certain things need to be resolved before I let you go through. Make sense? Right? So to configure the things that need to be resolved, right, are configured by configuring a resolve attribute of the route. Yes? So what's going to happen is that go check these things. If these things are true, then I will let you through. Then I will instantiate this route for you and let you navigate where you want to go. Make sense? All right. So what we're going to do is that we're going to configure something here. I have deliberately chosen a gibberish name for the configuration for now. And on the right-hand side of that property, we're going to check login. I'm going to first resolve whether you are logged in. Okay, make sure that you are logged in. And the only place where that information is being stored, the only truth of whether you are logged in and the status of your login is only on the server. We should never rely entirely on the client on whether you are logged in or not. That status has to be done on the server. So what we're going to do is that we're going to first check on the server. Hey server, do you know if this person is logged in? Okay, and we're going to do it here in a function right there. Right. This function is going to go out back to the server and verify if indeed this person is logged in. Right. And how does it do it? It's going to go back to the server. It's going to say user service. Check if this person is logged in. Check login. Right. I just chose these names to be the same, again, just to keep it straight in my head. Right. It's going to go out to the server and the server. Notice that I'm not going to provide any user ID. Right. The server is going to remember, right, hopefully in the session, whether this person, if there's somebody logged in. Okay. Where is it stored whether I'm logged in or not? The cookie. Remember, in every request that goes back to the server, the cookie is going to go back to the server. And the server is going to unwrap it, is going to grab the ID from that cookie, and it's going to go back to the database and say, hey, is this user a valid user? Also, it's going to check to see if that cookie hasn't timed out yet. Hasn't been more than 30 minutes since the last time you came, right? If it hasn't been less than 30 minutes, then the cookie is still valid. I'm going to go and check the ID. If it has been more than 30 minutes, the cookie is no longer valid. I don't care if the ID was correct. I'm going to not going to let you through. Make sense? Right? Okay, so this check logged in. Actually, I think I provided an example of this. Maybe not. Check logged in is going to go out to the server and check it, right? And in the response is going to come back with a user. It's going to come back with a user, and that user, whether it's a valid user or not, right? We're going to determine on whether we're going to allow this to go through or not, right? What we're going to do is that this resolve, these objects over here, these objects are all meant to be promises, right? Because what happens here is that I might need to check many things, right? Are you logged in? Do you have the right authorizations? I might have to check several things, right? And those checks might all be asynchronous, right? Maybe I can't test them synchronously, right? I might need to each one of them be a whole bunch of AJAX calls, right, to different services, and then as they come back, I need to all of them to come back and all vote on whether this should go forward, right? If you want to do a transaction of actually purchasing, I need to travel to Chicago over the weekend, and I'm trying to book my travel. So I need to check a whole bunch of things, right? Maybe I need to check that I will have a car, that I will have a place to stay, and I need a flight there, right? If any one of those three fails, I'm not going to Chicago, right? But each one of those three might be queries to three different services, right? I'll go to Expedia, I'll go to Cheapo Air, and I'll go to to Hertz, right? All three services might come back, and any one of them comes back, sorry, I don't have that combination of hours or query, right? Anyone fails, I'm not going to let you go and say, yes, your flight or your trip has been booked. Make sense? Right? So if we are Expedia and we need to interact with three different services, with American Airlines, we need to communicate with Hertz, and we need to communicate with Hotel.com. Right? We need to communicate with all these three services asynchronously. Right? It'll be three asynchronous calls. We need to wait for them all to come back, and then they all have to agree that it's okay before we let you notify you that yes, you are booked to go. Make sense? So this resolve allows you to do those three or four queries independently. Here we're only doing one thing. Okay, but we can certainly check car. The other one might be check flight, right? And the other one might be check hotel. Yes, and those would be three different queries that would vote. If any one of them fails, I'm not going. Make sense? Well, here we're only doing one thing: check login. Check login. All right, and the check logging is going to communicate with our service. If this were check hotel, it might be communicating with hotel.com. If it be a check flight, it might be communicating with American Airlines. Yes, right. So it could be three different APIs. Here we're only going to use our API. Check login is going to be implemented in user service. So we need to implement it in user service. We're going to come here and implement it, actually implement it. So check login. So what check login is going to do is going to go out to the server, right? And it's going to say return HTTP dot get API / check login. Right? So it's going to go out to the server, and the server is going to respond, yes, that person, that cookie you passed me in that request matches to the currently logged in user. Or it's going to say, nope, that cookie timed out. Or that cookie, the ID in that cookie doesn't match with the currently logged in user. Right? Hopefully we'll say yes. So that's going to go out to the server. On the server side, we need to listen for that incoming request. What did I call it in my example? I call it logged in, but I'll rename it. Check logged in. So what do I call it here? Check login. Check login. Check login. And logged in. Do I have an example of implementing it? Yeah, there it is. So here's the implementation. What this is going to do is it's going to use a new function that wasn't there before. This is a function that was added by the Passport infrastructure. Right? It's a function that makes it very easily to query, right, whether there is a currently logged in user. Right? So we can just copy that. Let's implement it right here. Function check logged in request response, and we can immediately respond whether is the current user authenticated. This will return true or false. If it's false, if it's true, I'm going to return request that user. Remember I said, right? Passport puts the currently logged in user in the request, so there it is. I'm returning the request object of the currently logged in user. Otherwise, if it's not logged in, I'm just going to return a 0. Right? So on the config here, this is either going to be an object representing the currently logged in user or 0. Right? So I'm going to check to see if the user is 0. That means that nope, this user is not logged in. Right? So that failed. I'm not going to let you go through the profile. Or I have a user, a valid user. Yes? Okay. All right. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to handle this promise here. The way this handles multiple asynchronous requests is through promises. Right. Now, to be able to handle promises at a granular level, right, up to this point we've been using the high-level .then, right? But we could be a little more granular and decide exactly when we want to fail or be successful in a promise. To do that, we're going to use a library, a promise library called the Q library. This allows us to handle promises at a more granular level, right? And decide exactly when we want to succeed and let a promise go through, or generate an error, right? Or fulfill that promise, right? So the way that these promises work is that we create a deferred object. This object is going to be the promise that allows the others to register the then, right? This is the object. This is the promise that gets passed to whoever is registering the then function, right? So the ways we do it is that we generate that we generate the promise right here, and we return it immediately. We say return deferred that promise. So here's a promise. That promise is the object that has the .then function, right? That allows the other folks to say then and then provide a function call. Yes? That it's inside of that object, the promise. We created one ourselves, right? And so something like this is what's happening inside of the $HTTP.get or the $HTTP.put or post. In there, if you open up the source code, right? Somebody's creating the promise and sending it back to us for us to call the then function on it. Yes? Right? So we're looking inside of, internally what's happening. We're granularly doing this. And here's where we get to decide whether the then function succeeds or not. Right here we can say deferred and we reject, right? We reject and say nope, the promise failed, meaning the promise cannot be fulfilled, or the promise deferred here, we resolve the promise and pass the user object, right? Pass the user object, right? So let's try this out. Let's restart this, and now if I go back here and well, first log in. Let's log in. So we go po and say log in. So it's still good, right? But now if I grab this and I go to Safari, it still works. What? Wait a minute. That should not work. Not Safari. Let me use Chrome. Let me inspect. Let me do a source config, and here's my promise. Okay, let me step through this. Okay, so notice that it's not letting me go to the profile page immediately. See that? It's kicking me out to the check logged in user. Okay, there it is. Oh, because I need the data, the dot data. Okay, so this is not the user. This is the response. Okay, that's why. So really I need to unwrap it in the service. Where is it? On the service side here, in the check logged in, before returning it, I'm going to unwrap it, then function response, and I'm going to unwrap it and then return response.data. Okay, let's try it again. What happens to Safari? Okay, so if I refresh, oh, there it is. So user is 0. Okay, so now it's 0. It's going to go into the reject. And notice that it did not render the profile. See that? It did not render the profile. If I grab that and I go to Safari, I didn't log in. If I type in now the profile, notice that it no longer shows the profile page like before. See that? It's refusing to instantiate the controller. It's refusing to give me the templates for the profile page. Okay, it's not. It doesn't know what to do really. Okay, we could deliberately decide what to do, how to handle this, that we have a reject. Okay, what should actually happen? We could, for instance, decide that that because we're rejecting it, you should actually go back to the login page, right? Or the home page, or however you want to handle this, right? Or some error page telling us to please try again or something, right? In our case, notice that if I paste there the profile, nope, no, not that. Where's the profile? Right, so if I grab the profile and I paste it in here now, right? Notice that it's not letting me in, right? It's kicking me back to the login page. That makes sense? Only if I actually log in as Po, right? Does it actually let me go into the profile? That make sense? Yes? Okay. No. All right. So that's one thing, right? So we can now protect pages. We can protect routes by providing the check login, right? So now any page that I want to protect, notice that here now if I refresh, and now it's going to succeed. Oh, maybe not. Wait. Oh. Okay, I'm here, and I go to the website and whatnot. Notice that if I grab this, and again, if I handle this right here in Safari, if I close this, right, and I grab a new session and I paste it, and I go to the website, notice that it's letting me go in there. Okay, even if I'm not logged in, So if I want to protect it, it's as easy as which one is it? The route is this one, right? It's user ID website. So user ID website. If I want to protect this, I can just easily just copy this and just paste it in there. Now that Safari, if am I still logged in? Let me close that. close it and start Safari again. Paste it. No. Let me copy that. Let me paste it in there. Notice that it's kicking me back to the login page. Now that page is also protected. Right? It's expecting me to log in first before it lets me go into and list all my websites. See that? All right. So I can protect any page by just adding that resolve anywhere I want to protect. Make sense? All right. But we'd still notice that we are still using the ID of the user, right, encoded as part of the URL. That's still a little bit dangerous, right? Again, just displaying any identifiable information even as part of the URL, it's somewhat dangerous. Somebody can grab that and somehow start using it as to pose as us, even though it's not us, right? If they have our ID, so we would like to just remove that even from that URL, right? Because the server has that, right? The server has this information. It doesn't need to be stored anywhere on the client side. So let's do that next, right? Let's remove the need to even have the ID here. All right, let's do that next.